In this world, Head lived a dog's life, a world built on a simple, brutal rule. The weak lose everything: their wealth, their status, and eventually, their lives. And so, with his last breath, he was swallowed by the very desert that defined his wretched existence. A fitting end for one known as the Burning Desert's Sand Mage. It all began 100 years ago, when a single, blinding ray of light struck the earth. An apocalyptic beam that began to devour every living thing on the planet. The once vibrant blue marble was scoured clean by its unforgiving glare, leaving behind nothing but a vast, desolate grave of sand and sorrow. Humanity's last survivors could only cower inside their fortified cities, racing through the endless wastes. And it's here our Sand Mage sits, thinking if you're going to destroy something, you might as well destroy it all. But the quiet is shattered by a sudden jolt, sending him slamming into the side of the bus. A smug grin spreads across a brute's face, who claims his hand simply slipped. With a mocking tone, the muscle-bound thug asks for a name so he can properly apologize. Our Sand Mage looks up, his eyes cold and sharp, and gives a single name: Zeon. This only amuses the bully and his cronies, who erupt into laughter at his expense. But their laughter dies as they see the look in Zeon's eyes, a flicker of pure killing intent. The thug drapes a heavy arm over his shoulder, reminding him they're all headed to the mines together. But these men aren't miners. Not a single one of them. They're all criminals, fugitives sent to this wasteland, and he wonders what crime Zeon committed. Zeon gives him an answer, not with words, but with a fist buried deep in his face. The thug sails through the air, crashing hard into the seats behind him. Zeon slowly walks forward, telling him he's completely misunderstood the situation. He was sent to this wasteland for one simple reason: murder. But he offers a chilling clarification. In the neon-drenched streets of Neo Seoul, only the powerful are considered people. He remembers the incident clearly: a thief who tried to rob him. A nobody who bled out on the floor, but not before issuing a final threat, a name drop meant to seal Zeon's fate. The name was Lee Jiryong, and hearing it again still sends a shock of fear through him. Because in their world, if the powerful are people, then awakeners are the gods above them. And in his arrogance, Zeon, a mere rat, had killed the pet of a god. He tried to disappear into the mines, but now, back in the present, it seems that past has finally found him. The thug smirks, his fist planted on Zeon's face, mockingly asking if he's had enough. But a jolt of pain shoots up his arm, and he looks down in disbelief. Why is his hand the one that's injured? In a flash, Zeon's foot connects, sending the man flying through the cramped transport. The thug crashes against the far wall, letting out a choked scream of agony. Another man, the blonde one, cracks his knuckles, revealing he's the brother of the man Zeon killed. Zeon's eyes widen in sheer terror. All this running, all this hiding, only to end up right back in an awakener's grasp. But this one's different. Red energy flares to life around the blonde thug as he prepares to teach Zeon a lesson. Before he can move, a hand clamps down on his head from behind it. Zeon, looking anything but scared. Suddenly, the entire vehicle is thrown violently to the side, kicking up a massive wave of sand. The prisoners are tossed around like dolls, one of them screaming at the driver, having no idea what's really happening. The driver, slumped over the wheel, finally sees their destination through the shattered windshield. One of the thugs, bloodied and confused, screams at him, demanding to know what he's babbling about. But the driver's voice is hollow, revealing a chilling truth: they were never going to the mines. The prisoner's anger gives way to a cold dread as he tries to understand. With his last moments, the driver clarifies their horrifying fate. They were being eaten. The entire vehicle is a piece of bait, spiraling down the maw of a colossal sandworm. Pure chaos erupts inside as the men scream and claw at each other, trapped in their steel coffin. For Zeon, this is a familiar terror, a memory of being devoured by the desert itself. It's the same old story, whether facing an awakener in Neo Seoul or a monster in the sands. In this world, the strong simply take, and the weak are just part of the food chain. And as his consciousness fades, Zeon comes to a bitter conclusion. So this is it, dying simply because he was too weak to live. It's a tired, predictable story, one he can't help but play out. He briefly wonders what might have been, but it's just pointless rambling now. His body sinks into the crushing darkness, buried by the very desert that claimed him before. The sand swallows his hand, pulling him under into oblivion. He becomes the center of a swirling vortex, his life spiraling away. But in that final moment, something inside him ignites, and his eyes fly open. With a choked gasp, he's violently spat back out from the depths. Clawing at his throat, Zeon takes his first ragged breath, reborn in the belly of the beast. But this isn't just a rebirth. His entire being is being rewritten from the inside out. A deep thrum echoes through his soul, as the visions begin ruins of a forgotten age. His eyes widen in sheer terror, sweat beading on his skin. What is this he's seeing? He sees landmarks of a lost world, monuments to failure, all swallowed by endless dunes. An entire civilization, a testament to greatness, now just a ghost city buried in grit. The reflection in his eye is one of utter desolation, a world painted in dust and death. The scale of the destruction is impossible. Structures that once scraped the sky now just broken teeth. He's overwhelmed, the crushing weight of this dead world pressing down on his mind. His perspective rockets outward, beyond the sky, revealing the corpse of an entire planet. And in the center of it all, a single, terrifying truth coalesces into one word: sand. A new title burns into his consciousness, a name for this power he never understood: Blaster. And with it, a memory surfaces, a desperate, forgotten battle against a colossal sandworm. He remembers being swallowed whole, trapped in the belly of the beast with a single, defiant thought. In a world that had already died, where everything had crumbled into nothing but sand, he had sworn to himself that he would survive, no matter the cost. That same unbreakable will now ignites his eyes, burning away the vision of despair. He stands before that same monstrous memory, a tiny man against a god of sand, his resolve unshaken. But something is different now. He can feel a heartbeat, a power surging through his very cells. This feeling, this overwhelming energy he finally understands. This is an awakening. And as his power flares, the very fabric of this desolate world begins to warp around him. Within his mind, he roars at the colossal beast, daring it to come at him. But reality snaps back into focus as a powerful hand slams him into the ground. His eyes widen, the vision of the sand monster shattering completely. An unknown man effortlessly hurls him through the air, declaring him an obstacle. Zeon crashes painfully into the dunes, the wind knocked out of him. Spitting out sand, he can't comprehend where this new threat even came from. He looks up, dazed and confused, trying to process the sudden assault. Meanwhile, the stranger casually examines the black, inky remains of the real monster. He stands atop a cliff, his colossal greatsword planted beside him. With the beast dead, he wonders aloud if it's time to head back to the first floor. The sheer force of the blow echoes across the desolate landscape. Zeon can only stare in disbelief, his mind reeling from the impossible display of power. This is what a true awakened is, someone who can kill a sandworm that easily. Suddenly, a cheerful blue-haired girl appears out of nowhere, clinging to him with a grin. She proudly introduces the man as their captain, Jang Yongbum, boasting it's the fastest he's ever caught someone. Zeon is stunned by her strength, and a chilling frost begins to creep up his arm where she holds him. The captain approaches, casually noting that a sandworm isn't much of a challenge, and calls the girl Giselle. His gaze is sharp, clearly unimpressed with the scene before him. He orders Giselle to cut it out, his voice leaving no room for argument. With a playful salute and a sharp-toothed smile, she instantly snaps to attention. But Giselle doesn't just release him, she casually flips him through the air. She slams him into the sand, pinning him down with a triumphant, crazed smile. With a taunting laugh, she decides to guess his rank, reaching for the bandages on his arm. But as she peels them away, her playful expression instantly freezes into one of shock. She looks back to her captain, utterly bewildered. This guy, he isn't an awakened? Pointing to his bare arm, she screams that there's no rank insignia to be found. Zeon's mind reels in denial. No insignia? Impossible. That's the one thing all awakened share. Suddenly, a man in a truck starts screaming at them to get a move on before sunset hits. Giselle asks her captain what to do, since leaving him here means certain death. As Zeon mutters she nearly ripped his arm off. Jang Yongbum's gaze remains cold and steady, silently taking in the whole situation. Zeon's mind races, trying to make sense of this impossible situation. After a moment's thought, Jang Yongbum simply orders them to toss him in the truck. With their new passenger aboard, the vehicle kicks up sand as it speeds across the wasteland. The commander is losing his mind, screaming at them for dallying so close to sunset. But while the crew bickers, Zeon is just lying in the back, finding the ride oddly peaceful. He feels a strange connection to the world around him as grains of sand begin to stir. A thin stream of sand rises from the truck bed, flowing like water right beside his head. Sitting up, he realizes it's moving to his will. He definitely has an awakened ability. So why couldn't they see his insignia? He recalls the color, it felt different. Then he sees it on his arm. The rank mark is a golden hue, the exact same color as the sand. He finally understands. The color of an insignia reflects an awakened's elemental affinity. Magic types, like that quirky ice user Giselle, are marked with a signature blue, while the simple-minded physical types, like that well-dressed thug, are branded in red. But his golden mark, it signifies something far rarer, something unheard of. An ability to control the very sand beneath his feet? It's a power that defies all known categories. The insignia might scream F rank, the lowest of the low, but he can feel it. A wicked grin spreads across his face as he senses the infinite, desert-like potential coursing through him. He resolves to wait, to hide this terrifying power until the time is right. For one day, this entire desert, no, this whole world will become his stage. As the truck rumbles on, it approaches a desolate city carved from the very sand and stone he now commands. At last, he arrives at his destination, the mana crystal mine. On the surface, it all looks deceptively normal. Before he can even process his surroundings, a guard barks at him to follow, not caring that his hands are still bound. As he's led away like a prisoner, a pair of watchful eyes follows his every move from the sidelines. The woman, Giselle, casually stretches, dismissing him as the lucky sole survivor and nothing more. But her companion, a hardened veteran, immediately shuts that down. No, he thinks, that wasn't a fluke. His gaze intensifies, trying to piece together the puzzle of this mysterious F-ranker. He recalls the grotesque, blood-soaked hole where the creature had emerged and where everyone else had died. Watching the boy disappear into the facility, the veteran feels a strange premonition, knowing they're fated to meet again. The scene shifts to the grim reality, waiting for Xion on the inside. A crowded, tense common room filled with the desperate, the dangerous, and the damned. Welcome to the mines. A guard shoves a gun in Xion's face, telling him to shut his mouth and wait for the supervisor. Xion can't believe it. Is he just going to be left here? The guard angrily asks if he'd prefer a bullet first. With a scoff, the guard dismisses him as a worthless nobody who couldn't cause trouble even if he tried. Left alone, Xion mutters dumbass and decides he might as well find something to eat. His hunger leads him to a small food stall, and he tries to get the old vendor's attention. But just as he's about to speak, something else catches his eye, making him freeze. It's a propaganda poster plastered on the wall, proudly declaring, "Let our labor light up Neo's soul." A voice beside him asks if he thinks it's a fine motto, as the old vendor offers him a drink. With a dry, cynical laugh, the old man says it's so true, it's almost a joke, since everyone knows the city runs on mana crystals. Xion leans in, intrigued, asking what he means if not crystals. Then what is the city's real power source? With a gnarled finger, the old man points directly at Xion. The city's real power source, its people like him. He calls them rats, a self-replenishing resource that does as it's told, making them a perfect, endless fuel. Xion scoffs, remarking that the old man sure has a lot of opinions for a stranger, but the vendor just chuckles it off. Then he leans in with a knowing look, asking how it felt being inside the sandworm. Xion's expression tightens, but the old man continues, calling him a dazed brat destined for the dung heap, not some refuge. He scoffs at Xion's claim of being here for money, then gestures for him to look at something interesting. All he sees is a dusty shelf stacked high with identical, grimy-looking boxes. Is this old man senile? Xion asks what all this trash is, but the vendor just smiles, calling it his collection. A chilling grin spreads across his face as he reveals each box is the final end for those who came here in Xion's future. His voice echoes over a grim vision of the past, explaining how everyone resists their fate in the mines at first. They sell everything they own, their very selves, just to hold out against the inevitable. But it's only stalling as their last hopes vanish, and they're consumed by the darkness. The old man sneers that heroes might leave a name, but trash only leaves behind more trash. And he's looking forward, he says, to seeing what kind of garbage Xion will become. Unimpressed, Xion just asks for the price, and the vendor hits him with a casual, insane 10 sol. He explodes, asking if the meat is sprinkled with gold, but the old man is completely calm. He explains that everything is precious here. Even the skewer Xion tossed was worth 9. Xion just smirks, figuring this is a simple shakedown, and says sorry, he doesn't have the money. But that defiance catches the ear of some local thugs, who slowly turn to face him. His smirk vanishes, replaced by cold sweat as he realizes he just picked a fight with the whole street. The vendor leans in, asking if Xion ever questioned how an old man could operate so freely in a place like the mines. And suddenly, Xion sees it, he's completely surrounded, a lone figure in a darkness filled with predatory eyes. The old man watches him, a calm predator sizing up its prey, and asks him what he's going to do now. All of Xion's earlier defiance shatters in an instant. Hess on the ground, pleading with the vendor, trying to talk his way out of a debt he can't possibly pay. But the old man just grins, saying he's not heartless. If Xion is short on cash, they can always trade for something else. His gaze locks onto the mana crystal in Xion's pocket, suggesting it would be a perfect payment. Xion's eyes widen in horror. He can't believe it, even the rumor about the crystal has spread this far. The vendor's demand is simple and absolute. Hand it over, and he'll give him a very fair price for it. But for Xion, that's not an option. He thinks of everything he's done, everything he's endured to protect that single crystal. Clinging to the old man's arm, Xion desperately asks if there's any other way, maybe on credit. But one of the vendor's thugs has clearly run out of patience. He screams at his boss to stop wasting time and just get rid of the kid. In that moment, a dark vision flashes through Xion's mind, the raw power of a sandblaster. He sees the thug's arm torn from his body, held up to a crowd frozen in silent horror. The imagined slaughter escalates, with sand and blood filling the air as bodies are ripped apart. And at the center of it all, he sees himself, eyes glowing with a terrifying, absolute power. A voice suddenly snaps him out of it, demanding he pay attention. The thug asks if he's okay, noting he'd been spacing out, lost in a dream. Back in reality, Xion makes his choice, slamming the mana crystal onto the table with a sharp crack. With the deal made, Xion presents the large magic stone he fought so hard for. The old vendor inspects it with a bored expression, clearly unimpressed by its size. He offers a pathetic 100 soul, causing Xion to erupt, screaming that it's worth at least 3 times that. Xion grits his teeth, cursing the scarcity of this place and his own powerlessness. He's slammed down onto the counter, pinned and forced to confront his grim reality. His hand trembles with suppressed rage. He knows he could kill this old man, but he forces himself to wait. A dark, cunning smile spreads across his face as he changes tactics, asking the vendor for plenty of change. The old man warns him about the robbers in the area, and Xion can't help but think he's looking right at one. Amused, the vendor decides to be generous since it's their first transaction. He points to a pile of junk, telling the boy he can take any single item he wants. Xion sifts through the pile, complaining that he thought there'd be something decent, but it's all trash. The old vendor watches, internally noting what an interesting, tenacious kid he is. He hasn't seen such petty, scrappy vitality in a long time, amused by Xion's absolute refusal to accept a loss. But as Xion messes with the junk, his eyes suddenly lock onto something specific. The vendor explains that the item was just some random thing a caravan left behind. Deciding he won't find anything better, Xion snatches up an old, forgotten hourglass. Clexi scoffs at his choice of useless junk, but Xion just brushes him off as he turns to leave. Before walking away completely, he pauses and casually asks the old man for his name. With a proud shout, the vendor bellows his name out into the night. Clexi. A sharp, predatory smile spreads across Xion's face as he tells Clexi he hopes they never meet again. As they part ways, Clexi calls out a cryptic final word, wondering aloud if their paths might cross again. Alone in his room, Xion pulls out the strange hourglass he bartered for. He studies the trinket, noticing there's only about 10 minutes of sand left in the top chamber. Finding a spot on the floor, he decides it's time to see if this thing has any hidden properties. He takes a deep, centering breath, trying to focus his will. With his eyes narrowed, he prepares to channel his newfound power into the object. His eyes flare with a golden light as he mentally commands the sand to move. But nothing happens. The sand stays perfectly still, mocking his effort. He groans in frustration, realizing it wasn't some special item linked to his awakening. Still, he can't shake the feeling that he's seen this hourglass somewhere before. It felt strange, as if this hourglass was specifically prepared for him. The feeling was both familiar and completely new, calling to a part of him he didn't know existed. But his contemplation is shattered as the door is kicked open by a furious thug. A man named Park Manhwa storms in, screaming about why Xion isn't already crawling to the mine. But Xion is calm, simply correcting the brute and effortlessly ducking under a vicious kick. He dodges with an agility that leaves Manhwa completely stunned. The enforcer's surprise quickly turns to pure rage as he clenches his fist. He tackles Xion to the ground, pinning him with brute strength. Manhwa screams that unawakened trash like him should just shut up and take the beating. But something in Xion's eyes makes him freeze, and the bully stammers, telling him to just follow. Park Manhwa stomps away, leaving Xion to pick himself up off the filthy floor. But as he watches him go, Xion's eyes burn with cold fury, vowing to remember that name for the day he gets his revenge. Soon after, he's escorted to the dark, oppressive entrance of the Sector 3 mine. A brutish foreman greets him not with a welcome, but with a roar, ordering a subordinate to gear up the new bastard. Another miner hands him a helmet and vest, informing him the cost for everything will be deducted from his pay. Xion, completely unfazed by the hostility, simply asks how much the wages are. That simple question is treated as defiance, and a heavy tool comes swinging down without warning. It smashes the light on his new helmet to pieces, the foreman screaming that he'll be paying for that damage too. As punishment, he orders Zeon to be sent to Tunnel 472, a place the other miner knows is a death sentence. When the foreman threatens him for hesitating, Zeon simply accepts his fate, ready to be led into the darkness. The bearded miner shoves Zeon forward, whispering that he'd better not return without a magic stone. Descending into the deep, winding mine, the miner explains Zeon's terrible luck. He reveals this place has it all: gambling, booze, drugs, just like the city above. Zeon dryly notes that with idiots like Park Manhwa around, business must be thriving. He then complains about the hard labor, worried about his supposedly delicate skin. The miner offers a chilling reassurance. No one has ever been injured in there, not one. They finally arrive, standing before the dark, gaping maw of shaft 472. Zeon, ever confident, says he'll be back soon, but the miner gravely tells him that's not going to happen. He warns that over a dozen people have simply vanished inside, with no explanation. As the gate closes, the miner offers a quiet apology and a thank you, leaving Zeon to face the darkness. The miner's final words are a grim thank you for going where no one else dared. The truth crashes down on Zeon. Vanished meant they all died. He screams at the ascending cage, but they're gone. His shouts fade into a stunned silence. They really just left him here. The shock boils over into pure rage, and he smashes his pickaxe wildly against the rock wall. But in his blind fury, his grip falters for just a second. His only tool, his only weapon, slips from his grasp and soars into the oppressive darkness. Now completely alone in a cavern swirling with an unnatural mist, he finally takes a breath to assess the situation. That's when he feels it he was too angry to notice before, but this whole shaft is saturated with mana. As he walks deeper, the energy grows thicker, an oppressive weight that would have crushed a normal person by now. He stops, his eyes locking onto something just ahead in the gloom. And there it is, resting on the cavern floor, his pickaxe. The handle's snapped, but he can't help a small, relieved laugh. At least he has something. But as he steps forward, the ground beneath him erupts into a swirling vortex of dark energy. His brief moment of relief shatters into pure, undiluted terror. This isn't just a pitfall, his mind screams in denial. It's a port. He's sent tumbling into the abyss, his helmet flying from his head. His one and only tool clatters uselessly into the darkness far below him. As he plummets, his mind flashes back to a life he'd rather forget, a child abandoned on the rainy streets. He remembers the brutal kicks and punches for stealing just a scrap of food. All he ever wanted was to not be hungry, to have a chance to dream of something more. He remembers a life spent cowering, paralyzed by fear after the choices he made. He was always running, hunted relentlessly, with orders to be dragged back no matter the cost. All he ever wanted was a chance at a normal life, a simple existence without the constant threat of death. That desperate dream is cut short as he slams face first into the hard, unforgiving ground. He pushes himself up, his head throbbing, immediately hit by a wave of suffocating heat. His hand touches the surface below, not rock or dirt, but a thick layer of fine, dark ash. A cold sweat breaks out as the pieces start clicking into place in his mind. That vortex in the mine, it wasn't a cave-in. He fell through a portal, and his eyes widen at the vast, hellish landscape of fire and molten rock. He's inside a dungeon. Before he can even process his new reality, a razor-sharp attack whips past, narrowly missing him. He recoils, a hiss of pain escaping as the very ground burns his hand. The entire landscape is a scorching hot plate, forcing him to run just to keep from being cooked alive. This is no nightmare. The grim reality sinks in that he's trapped in a high-level dungeon. He realizes it's not just dirt, but volcanic ash, poisonous dust that's already searing his lungs with every breath. Thinking fast, he tears a strip of fabric from his already ragged pants. He fashions a crude mask, his mind racing to find a way out of this hellscape. If there's an exit, it has to be at the dungeon's focal point, a colossal, fiery mountain peak looming in the distance. He knows staying put is a death sentence, and with no beasts in sight, this is his one and only chance. There's no time for caution. He'll have to break through using the shortest, most direct route possible. With a surge of adrenaline, he sprints forward, reminding himself that he is Zeon, a man who doesn't know how to give up. But his desperate sprint is cut short as the ground shudders violently beneath him. The earth cracks open, and with a curse, he realizes his path is gone. A sheer drop appears from nowhere, and he reaches out, pleading with fate itself. He tumbles into the chasm, the searing heat of lava rushing up to meet him. But even dangling over a river of fire, he screams his defiance, refusing to be afraid. He claws his way back to solid ground, collapsing, every muscle screaming in protest. Lying in the dust, his exhaustion gives way to a burning, simmering rage. He screams a promise of vengeance to the man who put him here. Park Manhwa will pay. but he forces himself to calm down. Getting angry is a luxury he can't afford in this heat. His resolve hardens once more. He will survive this, no matter what it takes. He stares out at the hellish landscape, steeling his resolve. 4 more times. Just a few more jumps across the chasm, and he'll finally reach the other side. He has to stop thinking and just move. Hesitation now would be fatal. There is absolutely no way his life is going to end in a place like this. With a scream of pure defiance, he launches himself across the gap. But from the fiery depths below, a colossal, fanged maw erupts to devour him whole. Suddenly, the creature is impaled from within by dozens of razor-sharp spikes. The beast implodes, its body sinking back into the molten river with a splash. Strange, shimmering bubbles rise to the surface where the monster fell. Then, a shadow falls over the land as a far larger serpent rises from the depths. And from the molten aftermath, a strange, ash-covered cocoon cracks open. Zeon bursts out, gasping as the sheer heat of the cavern begins to melt the very air. He survived the explosion by instinctively controlling the volcanic ash, just like his sand. But that small victory is short-lived as his body finally gives out under the strain. He collapses, realizing the dungeon's environment itself is a far deadlier foe than any monster. The scorching ash fills his lungs, and his consciousness begins to flicker and fade. Lying motionless in the suffocating darkness, a single thought echoes in his mind. Is he dying? Even on the brink of death, his hand clenches into a defiant fist. It's so unfair to die like this, not after he just declared he would survive. But just as his last bit of strength leaves him, a heavy boot lands firmly on the ground nearby. Even in his delirium, Zeon tries to bargain with death, offering up a crocodile bag in his place. His mind flashes back to the giant maw of the creature that had swallowed him whole. But a calm, deep voice cuts through his dying haze, remarking on his interesting ability. Zeon jolts, his tired mind struggling to comprehend if this is the Lord of the Underworld. The voice identifies his power as sand control, and his eyes snap open. This is no hallucination. Someone is falling from the sky above, a figure plunging into the volcanic chasm with impossible grace. A wicked, familiar grin comes into view, and Zeon realizes with a shock it's the old man. Hez not just falling, Hez diving headfirst into this hellscape like it's a swimming pool. All thoughts of dying forgotten. Zeon screams, demanding to know who this man is and where they are. The old swordsman lands without a sound, casually explaining that this dungeon is now his personal hunting ground. With a manic grin, the swordsman tells Zeon to use those eyes of his and witness what's coming. He utters a single, cryptic word, crayon. The very ground beneath them erupts as a colossal shadow, a monstrous beast, begins to rise from the depths. The sheer pressure of its awakening slams into Zeon, who clutches his head in agony. He can only stare in disbelief, wondering what kind of monster this old man truly is. But his shock is cut short, as a swarm of fiery bird-like creatures descends from the cavern ceiling. A voice booms from the chaos, the old man calling him a dumbass. He roars that if Zeon has any worth at all, he'll have to survive this on his own. Without another word, the crazy old man leaps into the fray, engaging the massive shadow beast head-on. Zeon is instantly swarmed, barely able to react as the creatures attack with blinding speed. He desperately throws his body into motion, trying to fend off the swarm. With every kick and turn, he tries to create some breathing room, but it's useless. They're too damn fast, too slippery, and for some bizarre reason, they're all targeting his left side. He can only grit his teeth as their shadowy forms latch onto him. The fiery birds descend in a chaotic, inescapable storm of attacks. He's completely overwhelmed, taking hits from every conceivable angle. Panic begins to creep in. Not even his heightened senses or sand can keep up with this. He realizes with chilling certainty that if this continues, he's a dead man. But then a thought cuts through the noise. The old man already saved him twice. Suddenly, a calm, disembodied voice echoes in his mind, asking why he isn't answering. The old swordsman's voice rings out again, mocking Zeon. Is the kid deaf or just stupid? Zeon scrambles for a solution, anything to help him see these enemies he can't possibly follow. He curses himself, a helpless target trapped in a whirlwind of fiery beasts. But the voice cuts through his panic, promising to show him exactly why he's an idiot. The lesson begins. He must gather mana into his eyes, focusing and purifying it. He has to stop relying on sight and learn to feel, to see the world through mana itself. As another shadowy bird dives in for the kill, Zeon stands his ground amidst the fiery chaos, trying to embrace this new perception. The voice guides him, urging him to sense the raw, magical power of the beasts. Suddenly, he can see their mana cores, their lifeblood, and the perfect moment to strike. And in that moment, Zeon realizes it wasn't just a lesson. The old man knew this would happen. He foresaw this entire, insane battle. Watching from the sidelines, he can only wonder just what kind of monster is this man. Because the swordsman is laughing, absolutely reveling in the chaos. A single, blinding swing of his blade carves a path through the monsters and the earth itself. His eyes gleam with a manic energy, a thirst for battle that has clearly been dormant for too long. He screams for more, daring the entire swarm to come at him at once. A massive beast rises to meet the challenge, its rocky hide glowing with power. But the old warrior meets it with contempt, calling its efforts a shame. He effortlessly bisects the creature, standing over its corpse as the undisputed king of this battlefield. And he's actually disappointed, complaining that he was just getting warmed up. From the sidelines, Zeon can only stare, thinking he almost feels sorry for the monsters. The sheer scale of the destruction leaves him utterly speechless. He lets out a relieved laugh, believing that with all the monsters gone, the nightmare is finally over. But that relief instantly curdles into dread as he senses a new, terrifying presence. The very ground begins to tremble and split apart, erupting with a furious, molten energy. An immense pressure slams into Zeon, threatening to tear him apart. He collapses to the ground, overwhelmed by the sheer force of this new arrival's aura. As he struggles to breathe, the old swordsman calmly informs him that what he just felt was the boss's roar. Because every dungeon has a final source of its power, and theirs is just now waking up. A voice cuts through the chaos, declaring this monstrous arrival is the very reason he came here. Zeon can only stare in abject terror, unable to process the scale of the boss monster before him. But the old swordsman's face splits into a wicked, battle-hungry grin. He's been waiting for this. He roars out its name as it fully emerges from the molten earth, the Crimson Drake. Zeon asks if it's a dragon, but the swordsman corrects him it's not, but it's at least a B-rank threat. The words B-rank echo in Zeon's mind, and a horrifying realization begins to dawn on him. He recognizes the swirling blue energy, suffocating the area it's a field. The old man is surprised the kid even knows the term, explaining that high-level monsters have unique traits. Just like awakeners have ranks, monsters can have fields. A red one signifies a pure combat type. But this creature's field is a chilling, crystalline blue, which means something else entirely. A blue field isn't just an aura. It's a tangible, crystalline defense, a sign of a magic-type monster. The realization hits Zeon like a physical blow, and he screams in sheer terror. He can only stare, paralyzed, as the colossal Crimson Drake looms over them. All his struggles, all his knowledge, it feels worthless in the face of this kind of power. But the old swordsman simply smirks, meeting the beast's might with a blinding flash of his blade. The Drake roars, its energy clashing against the impossibly powerful strike. The swordsman relentlessly presses his assault, a blur of motion against the massive creature. A flicker of pure, battle-hungry madness shines in his eyes. He's having the time of his life. In response, the Drake gathers a cataclysmic blast of energy, ready to vaporize him. And the old warrior just flashes a wild, toothy grin, welcoming the impending destruction. His blade doesn't just block the attack, it carves straight into the Drake's hide with explosive force. A crazed, inhuman laugh escapes his lips as he mockingly asks if the beast is in pain. He tightens his grip, promising to be the one to personally put it out of its misery. Today, he declares, is the colossal creature's memorial day. Zeon, however, is screaming in terror, convinced that today is actually his memorial day. He can only run as the madman tears into the beast, splattering the cavern with blood and energy. The sheer force of the shockwave slams into him, tossing him aside like a piece of trash. The old swordsman becomes a blur of silver light, a whirlwind of death carving up the monster. Pinned to the ground, Zeon desperately wishes they would just fight a little farther away. All he can do is grit his teeth against the aftershocks of a battle he was never meant to witness. The old swordsman lets out a wild laugh, thrilled by the sheer destructive fun of it all. He unleashes a devastating attack, a Crimson Drake, asking if this isn't just like an amusement park. His draconic energy crashes down, tearing the cavern floor to shreds in a massive explosion. Zeon braces himself against the shockwave, barely managing to keep his footing. He can only grit his teeth and curse his pathetic inability to do anything but watch. The force finally overwhelms him, sending him flying backwards into a deep crater. He hits the ground hard, tumbling painfully across the jagged, broken earth. Lying there, battered and bruised, his gaze is fixed on the battle still raging high above. Reflected in his wide eye, the monster is now being torn apart by a brilliant blue energy. The old swordsman cackles with glee, taunting the Drake, asking if this is really all it has. He scoffs at how easily the so-called dungeon boss keeps bowing, calling it a disgrace. But the monster isn't finished. It begins gathering a blinding sphere of energy in its jaws. The swordsman's grin only widens, So, the boss does know how to do something interesting after all. In an instant, the creature unleashes a massive beam of pure power. The torrent of energy carves a deep scar across the cavern floor, aimed right at its target. As the light fades, the boss scans the empty space, searching for any sign of the old man. A calm voice then echoes from behind it, the swordsman asking if it was looking for him. The massive creature's head whips around, its glowing eyes wide with pure shock. With his blade pressed against its hide, he reveals he wandered the desert for a year just for this moment. His entire quest was to hunt this very beast, to use its heart to forge his greatsword, Crayon. His eye glows with a terrifying red light as he gives the creature its final command. Just die. With that, he plunges the colossal blade down into the monster's core. A cataclysmic wave of dark energy erupts, completely overwhelming the dungeon boss. The sword pulses with a malevolent red light, absorbing the monster's very essence. It carves a path of destruction straight through the creature, the old swordsman guiding its every move. His weapon emerges from the carnage, glowing and reforged by the immense power it just consumed. And there he stands, calmly holding his newly awakened sword, the year-long hunt finally over. A wicked grin spreads across his face as he praises his sword, Crayon, for its newfound strength. But a voice cuts through the silence, wondering if this old man is just crazy for talking to his weapon. The swordsman turns, almost impressed, mocking the moron who actually managed to stay alive. Zeon weakly replies that he almost died, but before he can finish, his body seizes up. An invisible force slams into him, sending him flying back as pure agony registers on his face. His vision blurs as dark, sharp tendrils of energy erupt from the ground beneath him. They pierce through his body in a brutal, instantaneous assault, skewering him completely. And yet, after the attack subsides, Zeon is left gasping on the ground, having survived again. The world fades to white, leaving him to process the impossible torment he just endured. He explains that surviving the old man's constant attacks actually sharpened his reflexes, earning a dry chuckle. But the swordsman suddenly grabs him, warning that with the boss dead, the whole dungeon is about to collapse. Zeon is completely bewildered, wondering why on earth the old man is manhandling him now. In response, the ancient warrior just throws his head back and lets out a wild, booming laugh. Then, without another word, he hurls Zeon off the ledge into a swirling pit, bidding a final farewell to the moron. Zeon plummets, screaming in pure rage that this crazy bastard is even worse than Park Manhwa. He crashes hard onto a sea of sand, the impact knocking the wind right out of him. A swirling portal spits him out, sending him tumbling across a vast, empty desert before it vanishes. As he coughs up sand, the swordsman casually steps out of the closing rift, explaining this is the exit. The swordsman looks down on him, bluntly calling him a moron for asking such a stupid question. He explains that while Zeon's sand manipulating ability is useful, the boy himself is pathetically weak. And so, he's giving him a choice, pointing towards the path that leads back to Neo Soul. The alternative? Follow him and maybe, just maybe, learn to become a better moron. Zeon, completely floored by this sudden offer, asks how long this crazy training would even last. The old warrior turns away, admitting he has no idea it could be months, years, or even decades. The sheer weight of that timeline leaves Zeon stunned, but the swordsman demands his decision now. Will he go back to his comfortable, predictable life, or take a gamble with a 99% chance of death? The intense pressure mounts as the old master stares him down, waiting for the choice that will define his future. A twisted, almost manic grin spreads across Zeon's face. A choice? He thinks this is all just a joke. He calls out to the old man, asking if he's completely lost his mind. Why would anyone give up their home and comfort to walk this scorching wasteland with him? But the swordsman's expression is dead serious. Yes, that is exactly what he's saying. Zeon turns away, sighing that there's nothing more to talk about then. Then, in a stunning reversal, he announces his decision. He will follow him. He explains that when he gets angry, he has to pay it back, but he's still too weak for revenge. His eyes flash with a dangerous light as he says that payback list includes the old man, too. He admits the swordsman is overwhelmingly stronger than anyone he's ever met, and that's why he's certain, but the old master just laughs, asking if he's certain he'll die. No, Zeon grins, has certain that if he follows this man, he'll become stronger than anyone else. The old master's face splits into a wicked smile, warning him that one day, he'll come to regret that certainty. And with that, he turns and begins their journey, telling the idiot to hurry up and follow. Almost immediately, the harsh reality sets in, with Zeon already gasping for them to slow down. 6 hours later, he's barely able to stand, pleading with the distant figure of his new master for a break. But the swordsman doesn't even turn around, his pace unwavering under the brutal sun. Zeon finally snaps, screaming in frustration at the old man's infuriating silence. The heat is unbearable, sweat pouring down his face as he realizes it must be 50 degrees out here. Every step is a struggle in the deep sand. He knows heatstroke is just a matter of time. Finally collapsing, he wonders what he can possibly do, only to hear the master's voice call him a fool for not using even 1% of his own power. The swordsman calls his struggling pathetic a sand user who can't even walk on sand. Zeon screams back in desperation, protesting that he only awakened a few days ago. But the old master is utterly unimpressed, asking him so what. He tries to protest further, whimpering that he's a lowly F rank, not a monster like him. That excuse finally makes the swordsman snap, grabbing him and roaring that ranks mean nothing. He demands to know if Zeon thinks anyone is born an S rank, that they're just blessed from the start. The old man's eyes burn with fury, shouting that to countless others, Zeon himself is the blessed one. That one word blessed echoes in Zeon's mind, and suddenly, his perspective shifts. With a flick to the forehead, his master tells him to stop whining and finally use his head. A fire lights in Zeon's eyes as he clenches his fist, realizing this is his ability to command. His master leans in, telling him that he's the only one who can figure out how to use his own power. A sharp crack echoes from the old man's grip, a painful reminder of how serious this is. He shoves Zeon away with a final, booming threat. Figure it out, or consider yourself dead. Left alone in the swirling dunes, Zeon finally focuses, drawing the sand under his command. He assesses his range a mere 5 meters disappointing, but he decides it's enough to work with. The first problem is the terrain itself, sand that sinks under his feet and drains his energy. An idea sparks. If he can't change the desert, hell change the ground he walks on by compressing it. It works. He practically glides across the solid path he creates, a huge grin on his face. But the rush of success fades as he feels the immense mana drain. This isn't sustainable. He pivots, trying another tactic reinforcing his own legs, and finds this makes moving far easier. From a distance, the old swordsman watches, analyzing the boy's every move. Zeon keeps trying and failing, a stubbornness the old man chalks up to the privilege of youth. His rank may be F, but his mana control is already pushing D rank levels. And just as the old man predicts, a spark of genius hits Zeon. It works. He rushes over, ecstatic, explaining he's only controlling the sand right under his feet. The praise goes straight to his head, and he immediately starts taunting the ancient warrior. That arrogance is met with a swift punch to the face, knocking him out cold. The swordsman warns him not to waste energy, then frantically checks if the boy is even breathing. Zeon groans, slowly waking up, completely disoriented and with no idea where he is. The old man just grunts that he's awake, complaining that he's been wasting his precious time. Zeon groans, his entire body screaming in protest as a piece of jerky is tossed onto his chest. He stares at it blankly, wondering what this strange, tough-looking food is. The old swordsman tells him to eat while he listens to a story from a long-forgotten past. He speaks of a time when weakness wasn't a death sentence, when protecting others was a noble cause. But the world has changed, and for Zeon, this brutal reality is all he's ever known. The old man lays down a choice: lie there and die, or get on his feet and prove he wants to live. Annoyed but spurred on, Zeon pushes himself up, grumbling that he gets the message. He sits there for a moment, the weight of the man's words settling in. It finally hits him just how ancient this warrior truly is, to have lived through such different eras. But then his focus shifts, wondering if the old man is even chewing that jerky anymore. Chewing slowly, Zeon mutters that a heads up about rationing would have been nice. But then, a realization dawns on him: this isn't about charity, it's a lesson. The old man is trying to teach him how to fish, so to speak, even if Zeon's never seen one in his life. As the sun sets, his pleas for another piece of jerky are met with a simple, resounding no. A sudden sneeze racks his body as the bone-deep chill of the desert night sets in. He'd completely forgotten how cold it gets, watching the old man stretch out, seemingly unaffected. Sleep offers no escape, especially when his only companion spends the night murmuring to his sword. Is this guy insane? Morning arrives, and with it, a desperate thirst just in time to see the swordsman wringing water from his own hair. Zeon's eyes narrow in fury. Again, the old man is hogging all the resources for himself, but then he notices the man's cloak, laid out to catch the morning dew, and the harsh lesson finally clicks. As Zeon gnaws on some jerky, he silently vows revenge on the crazy geezer for all this hardship. The old man calls him a moron, but Zeon proudly declares he's a dumbass, thank you very much. Completely unfazed, the swordsman just asks if he can feel it yet, but Zeon is clueless. Then it hits him, a low, steady vibration rumbling through the ground. His eyes widen in alarm as he realizes it's not just one source, but many. Suddenly, the desolate landscape is crawling with monstrous shapes, surrounding them on the cliffs. The old man calmly identifies the pack of snarling beasts. Great horned hyenas, a nocturnal threat caught at dawn. He turns to Zeon with a mocking tone, asking if the dumbass can survive this alone or needs another rescue. Before Zeon can even answer, one hyena lunges, only to be cut down by a casual, lightning-fast slash from the master. But instead of fear, a wild, confident grin spreads across Zeon's face. He doesn't need any help. Surrounded by the horde, Zeon roars that he's going to survive this on his own. With a feral grit, he gathers his sand magic, his eyes burning with defiant energy. He dives headfirst into the pack, unleashing a storm of sand that rips through the closest monsters. But even as he fights, a bead of sweat betrays the immense strain this is putting on him. In a massive display of power, he erupts the earth, impaling several hyenas on giant spikes. The initial confidence fades into desperation as he sees their numbers are still overwhelming. He stumbles back, gasping for breath, realizing he'll burn through his mana before he can kill them all. Facing the sea of glowing red eyes, he knows brute force won't work. He needs a smarter approach. He has to think, how can he fight more efficiently, with less mana? Then, just as another beast closes in, a flicker of an idea seems to cross his mind. He furiously slugs the creature, roaring at it for interrupting him while he was trying to think. The beast managed to bite him, leaving a nasty gash in his arm like a wind hole. A wind hole. He stares at the wound, the words echoing in his mind. The sheer number of hyenas is staggering, a veritable sea of teeth and claws. And suddenly, it all makes sense. He doesn't need to obliterate them, he just needs to make a hole. He tests the theory, firing a single, hyper-condensed spear of sand through a hyena's head. A manic laugh bursts from his lips as he realizes the sheer stupidity of his previous approach. After all, dead is dead, whether their head explodes or just gets a tiny hole poked in it. This is the key. Fighting cost-effectively, using the absolute minimum mana for a lethal strike. He remembers his master's patient style and, with a wild cry, begins to fight smarter, not harder. But the old swordsman's attacks seem to only annoy the beasts, who mock him, saying his strikes just tickle. The hyena roars, thinking it has the upper hand, but it has only succeeded in truly angering the master. Deciding he can't let a dog that bites people live, the old swordsman declares hell, end them all, right here, right now. An absolutely unhinged, bloodthirsty grin spreads across his face as he prepares to unleash hell. Watching from a safe distance, Zeon panics, realizing with dread that the old man is doing it again. The swordsman lets out a furious roar, not of a man, but of a natural disaster. A cataclysmic wave of raw energy erupts from him, tearing the very ground apart. Zeon is caught in the devastating shockwave, screaming as the force throws him through the air. He looks on in disbelief at the sheer insanity of it all. The old man didn't even care that people were nearby. Amidst the wasteland he created, Zeon can only wonder, is his master even human to do all that without a single skill? Zeon makes a mental note. Keep a low profile, because one wrong move around this monster and he's finished. The swordsman, however, is perfectly relaxed, taunting the snarling alpha female for making such a fuss. Enraged, the beast unleashes its true power, crackling with intense electrical energy. He realizes this is no ordinary monster. It's using a force field, meaning it's at least B rank. The energy coalesces into a massive phantom wolf, lunging forward to devour him whole. Watching from afar, Zeon screams for his master to get out of the way, but the old man simply raises a hand, effortlessly catching the full force of the lightning attack. Zeon's brain short-circuits, unable to process what just happened. His master just chuckles, commenting on how the lightning is a nice tingle, great for the knots in his shoulders. Then, with a demonic grin, he decides the massage is over and now, it's time to kill. With a single, earth-shattering punch, the old swordsman sends the massive beast flying. Zeon bursts out laughing, realizing how utterly insane it was for him to worry about this monster. Later, with the hyena's pelt draped over his head, he asks if they're leaving, earning a gruff remark about how he's surprisingly still alive. He asks about the beast's horn, and his master explains it's a rare material, imbued with lightning properties. Then, he tosses Zeon a newly crafted dagger, telling him to catch. The lesson begins now. From this day forward, Zeon finds his own food. But he offers one final tip. Holding up a slab of meat, the hyena's muscle is toxic, but the flank meat is safe. As Zeon just stares, dumbfounded, the old man yells at him to quit gawking and get moving before sunrise. Snapping to attention, Zeon scrambles to follow, hurrying through the strange, desolate landscape. And it seems he's a fast learner, happily humming to himself while chewing on his first successful hunt. He reflects on his situation. He's got plenty of food, even if he is getting a little thirsty. Plus, with his new sand step skill, walking across this wasteland is suddenly a piece of cake. Feeling himself a little too much, he decides to poke the bear, cheekily asking his master if he's jealous. He manages to dodge the first swing, celebrating his success for a split second before getting his head slammed into the sand. His master grumbles, unimpressed that the kid got one little skill and suddenly thinks he's hot stuff. Spitting out sand, Zeon complains that it was just a joke and he's already dying of thirst as it is. But mid-complaint, he freezes, sensing something impossible on the wind moisture. He looks up and realizes his master is staring intently at the same spot, a silent confirmation that he's not imagining it. Just beyond the shimmering haze, a sight they thought they'd never see again, an oasis. With renewed purpose, the two of them crest the dune, their salvation finally within reach. Zeon can hardly believe his eyes. The legendary oasis is real, and it's right in front of him. Without a second thought, he sprints towards the water, his master following at a much more composed pace. But their rest is short-lived, as the old man smirks, declaring he has plenty of materials for another round of training. And after what seems like an eternity of work under the night sky, Zeon finally roars in triumph, holding up his creation. After 8 long failures, he's finally crafted the perfect cloak, even joking that he could open his own boutique. But his master's voice cuts through his celebration, calling him an idiot, and Zeon instantly panics, clutching the cloak for dear life. The old man wasn't after the cloak, though. He tosses a grotesque, pulsating sack at the boy, telling him to eat it. Zeon recoils in disgust, only to be told that this is the gallbladder of a sandworm, a rare and potent medicine. His master's grin turns predatory as he delivers the ultimatum: eat every last drop or die. Defeated, Zeon reaches for the disgusting meal, silently wishing his master's arm would just fall off already. With a hard swallow, Zeon stares at the disgusting meal before him. He forces himself to take a bite, screaming that it's medicine and better than a beating. But as he eats, a strange feeling washes over him. What is this stuff? It's like eating clouds, and no matter how much he consumes, he never feels full. Suddenly, his master's voice cuts through his strange meal, calling him an idiot. The old man sits by the fire, calmly informing Zeon that it's now time for him to burn to death. Before Zeon can even process the words, a strange, fiery energy begins to glow from within his chest. A guttural scream tears from his throat as unbearable agony racks his entire body. This isn't just heat, it's an inferno, a raging power source ignited inside him. His mana is going berserk, a sun writhing in his stomach, and he fears he's about to be torn apart from the inside. But his master offers no comfort, simply gritting his teeth and telling the boy to endure it. As Zeon writhes, the old man begins a bizarre lecture about an oasis in the desert. He speaks of sandworms being born and returning, a natural cycle of life and death. Zeon, however, isn't really in the mood for a philosophy lesson, screaming curses at the old man. His pride shatters under the torment, and he breaks down, desperately begging for help. The master just gives him a cold, disappointed look, completely unmoved by his cries. Zeon vows to kill him, but the swordsman just yawns, telling him to pipe down so he can sleep. The pain finally overwhelms him and he awakens, his hand touching the warm sand of a sunlit shore. A familiar, upside-down face looms over him, once again calling him an idiot for finally waking up. Zeon jolts upright in a panic, which in turn startles the old man, who complains that he was the one who got scared. The old swordsman mockingly asks if he slept well, but Zeon corrects him he passed out from the pain. The master then asks how his body feels, and Zeon starts to answer that it's the same as before. But he stops short, a sudden realization dawning on him. No, it's not the same at all. His body feels impossibly light, his muscles are like hardened wires, and his mana is a swirling vortex. He's in disbelief at this sudden leap in power, wondering what on earth could have happened. The old man reveals the secret. It's all thanks to the sandworm's gallbladder. He explains it's an incredibly rare medicine for desert travelers, worth as much as a mana stone. Zeon is stunned, asking why he would ever use something so precious on him. The swordsman snaps back that it's because Zeon is just too damn weak to be of any use otherwise. With renewed vigor, Zeon vows to be useful, only to be told to shut up and eat. They're finishing the whole worm. The old swordsman notes with satisfaction that their meal was more than enough, lasting them for 4 days. With their strength restored, he tells the idiot it's time to set off again. Zeon, practically vibrating with newfound power, lets out a roaring yes. Their journey continues into a whipping sandstorm that engulfs the desert landscape. But for Zeon, a blaster attuned to sand, it feels like nothing more than a cool breeze. He's more surprised by the old man, who marches on without needing a single rest. The swordsman's silence is starting to get on his nerves though. He hasn't said a word for days. After 2 weeks of this relentless, silent trek, Xian begins to wonder if the old man is completely lost. Just as he's cursing his guide internally, a monstrous, red-eyed insectoid erupts from the sand before him. But Xian doesn't even flinch, slamming his fist into its face and telling the punk to shut it. He lets out a weary sigh, wondering just how much longer this journey will take. But a sudden realization snaps him back to attention. The ant he just punched is still standing, far sturdier than he'd given it credit for. He feels a strange energy underfoot, looks like sneaking past is officially off the table. His senses expand, revealing he's not just facing one monster, he's surrounded by a swarm. A smirk spreads across Xian's face as his eyes begin to glow. Fine. If they're eager to die, let's get it over with. He stomps the ground, telling them to come on before the old man gets bored and kills them all himself. With a unified shriek, the monstrous insects swarm in for the kill. Xian calmly pulls on his glove, ready to show them what a sandblaster can really do. He unleashes a massive sandstorm, thinking to himself that there's nothing better than a battlefield made of his own element. But as the dust settles, Xian realizes the old man has completely vanished, leaving him to deal with this mess alone. He yells after him, calling him a cheap loner who's probably friendless for a reason. Mid-rant, he stops, thinking maybe he went a little too far and tries to apologize. But then a sudden chill runs down his spine. There's no way the old man could have heard that. He's always on alert, his detection senses covering a 10-meter radius around him at all times. So he's always ready for an ambush, but what he's sensing now is something different. It's not the signature of a mere magical beast. It's a feeling of pure, overwhelming terror radiating from beneath the sand. Suddenly, the entire desert floor erupts as a swarm of winged ants bursts into the sky. Xian can only stare in disbelief, completely swamped by the sheer number of monsters. He screams for the old man, who watches from a distant pillar, as the endless tide of insects closes in. But the old swordsman just watches from his perch, completely unbothered by the boy's plight. Xian, meanwhile, curses himself for crying out like a child. He has to handle this. And then it hits him, there's no way his mentor didn't sense this. This is a test. A wicked grin spreads across his face. A bug is still just a bug, no matter how many there are. He throws himself into the fight, and is immediately swamped by the insectoid tide. His confidence shatters instantly as he's pinned down, screaming that he takes it all back. Buried under the swarm, he can only rage at them for ganging up on him like cowards. His final thought is a simple curse, as he's completely overwhelmed by the chittering mass. But then, a massive explosion of energy erupts from the center of the horde. The sand settles, revealing Xian standing high above on a pillar of his own making. He looks down from his perch, his heart sinking as he realizes it's a massive ant tunnel. The only way out is up. He's sure they can't handle aerial combat. But he's proven wrong instantly, as a winged variant slams into him mid-air. This can't be real, there's no way these things can fly. A piercing screech fills the air as the monster grabs hold of him. It drags him violently across the desert floor, a blur of sand and pain. The impact sends him flying, his body screaming in protest. He collapses to his knees, coughing up blood, utterly defeated. But through the haze of pain, he looks up, his eyes finding a familiar figure. It's his mentor, watching calmly from a distance, and Xian can only whisper his name. But a wicked, bloody grin spreads across Xian's face. He tells his master to watch closely. The old swordsman scoffs, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Now that's the spirit he was looking for. He begins his lecture, noting that Xian's sand ability is a blessing that could have given him a life of envy. But his tone turns deadly serious because that's where his potential would have ended. He explains that most fools are just obsessed with illusions, never truly developing skills on their own. True power isn't something that can be standardized like products on a factory line. His mind flashes back to a memory that has been seared into his soul. A moment he can never, ever forget. He recalls the great tragedy from 100 years ago, watching his city burn to the ground. The overwhelming helplessness as he saw countless people die right before his very eyes. He watched them all perish, his colleagues, his neighbors, and his family. The memory of his daughter's fate cuts the deepest. He couldn't protect anyone, a failure who lost everything. But then his focus returns to the present, pointing out that, unlike him, Xian survived his own ordeal. He tells the boy that this gives him infinite possibility, if he's willing to constantly walk the line between life and death. A grim, knowing smile spreads across the old swordsman's face as he delivers his lesson. The only way to grow is to embrace these moments and become even stronger. And Xian's wild, manic grin shows he understands completely, taunting the monsters that they're all about to die. The desert ants are thrown into chaos, completely helpless against his swirling sandstorm. He compresses the sand into a missile, a simple, ignorant, but incredibly powerful technique. With a thunderous boom, he unleashes the blast, tearing a path straight through the monster horde. But Zeon realizes he can do more, pulling in gravity, wind, and every ounce of energy he can find. The resulting power is explosive, dozens of times stronger than anything he's done before. With a feral grin, he declares that this is the end for them. He roars that it's their own fault for not killing him before he had the chance to grow. The old swordsman watches from afar, a slight smirk on his face at the kid's manic excitement. Spinning tornadoes of sand and rock tear through the battlefield, shredding everything in their path. The landscape is left utterly barren, scoured clean by his overwhelming power. Zeon stands victorious, a battered but triumphant grin plastered on his face. He screams to the heavens, asking the old man if he saw that, promising to slaughter them all. But his celebration is cut short, as a massive winged ant appears behind him, without a single sound. He clutches his body, the truth hitting him hard. It wasn't stealth, it was poison. That's why his mana felt so sluggish. The venom was specifically targeting his mana points. He roars in defiance, furious that he'd be taken down by such a cowardly tactic. But the poison is absolute, and his struggling body quickly gives out. His vision fades, a final curse on his lips as the world goes dark. He awakens in a horrifying cavern, surrounded by the glowing red eyes of countless giant ants. They've dragged him deep into their nest, and he's completely at their mercy. The ground writhes with their young, massive, hungry-looking larvae. One of the grubs slithers over to his arm and begins to gnaw on his paralyzed hand. His body won't move an inch, and pure terror sets in as he realizes he's about to be eaten alive. Blood streaks from his eye as a single thought echoes in his mind. Now what? He feels his life flashing before him, a sign that the end is truly here. The hungry larva continues its sickening chirps, inching closer to its meal. But with a sudden, violent slam, a fist crushes the grub into the cavern floor. The adult ants shriek in confusion, unable to process what they just saw. Zeon, his body trembling with effort, has somehow forced a single limb to move. He's furious, not a single good memory surfacing, only the bitter taste of an unfair life. He roars at the ant bastards, a strange power activating beneath his cloak. In a furious explosion, a storm of razor-sharp ash erupts from his body. The entire chamber is engulfed, catching the swarm of giant ants completely off guard. The storm of ash shreds through the ant's tough exoskeleton with ease. It rips through the cavern itself, tearing massive chunks from the walls. When the dust finally settles, Zeon is the only one left standing. But his eyes fall upon a message scrawled in the dirt. Eat it, it's medicine. He's supposed to eat this? A strange, glowing orb pulsating with energy. He warily asks the old swordsman if this is another one of his sick jokes, like that sand maw gallbladder. The old man smirks, muttering something about how he'll probably die, but his voice is too weak for Zeon to hear. Screw it. Hez cornered and desperate. It's not like eating it will kill him on the spot. He's never even tasted a strawberry before, but he braces himself for the worst, and his eyes snap open. What is this? It's unbelievably delicious, but the sweet taste is instantly forgotten as a chilling realization dawns on him. Was there another effect? His body erupts in agony as sharp thorns burst from his skin, and he collapses, calling out to the old man. This is organ inversion, a horrifying process where his insides are being twisted and torn apart. The queen ant's egg he just ate wasn't medicine, it was a violent, deadly toxin. A poison designed to pierce a person's organs from within until they suffer a horrific death. He lets out an inhuman scream, demanding to know what the hell that old man fed him. The swordsman just scoffs, telling him to quiet down. This is the kind of pain he must endure to survive. How could anyone get used to this? Zeon can barely even think through the torment. He coughs violently, his body spasming as the thorns retract with each wretched heave. Spitting out a mouthful of black blood, he can only manage a single curse. Zeon's mind flashes back to a happier moment, crushed by the thought that he finally trusted someone in this awful life. But in the end, he was just a fool for believing in the old man. His body finally gives out, slumping to the ground as the spikes on his back grow still. The swordsman, meanwhile, completely ignores him and turns his attention to the spoils of their battle. He reaches deep into the giant ant's carcass, tearing through its insides. With a wicked grin, he pulls out a massive, shimmering mana stone, a true jackpot. He decides the rest of the ant is useful too, and plans to pack it all up. Then, his expression hardens, as he begins a cold, internal monologue, addressing an old friend. Looking over at Zeon's still form, he muses that it can't be helped. The weak simply die. It's just his fate. And with no time to waste, the swordsman prepares to move on. But in the darkness of his mind, a flicker of consciousness returns, wondering if he's somehow still alive. A leering face suddenly fills his vision, the old swordsman, mockingly asking if the dumbass is finally awake. Before Zeon can even process it, a blast of sand explodes outward from his body. The swordsman scoffs, annoyed at the insolent brat for kicking up dust. He gives a condescending look, barely believing the kid is trying to act tough. But then, dozens of sand cocoons manifest from the swirling dust, surrounding the old man completely. The swordsman is instantly trapped, his smug expression wiped clean off his face. With a surge of power, Zeon forces jagged spikes of sand to erupt from the ground around him. He screams out in pure fury, demanding to know why he was left for dead. Eyes glowing with vengeful energy, he promises the swordsman that he will never be forgiven. Jagged spikes of sand lunge from all directions, a prison of grit and fury. Zeon unleashes everything he has, pouring his rage into a final, desperate assault. He pants, the massive expenditure of mana leaving him drained but defiant. As he again demands to know why he was betrayed, a condescending voice cuts him off. The swordsman emerges from the dust without a scratch, chiding the boy for his foolishness. Zeon can only stare in disbelief. All that power and it did absolutely nothing. The old man scoffs, saying if he truly wanted him dead, he wouldn't need to resort to poison. The cold logic sinks in, and Zeon's righteous fury begins to crumble into confusion. He then explains the nature of the queen ant's egg, a deadly poison that can also be a divine medicine. It purges the body and fills the void with mana, a power Zeon just experienced firsthand. His mana capacity, the old man reveals, has now tripled, maybe even quadrupled. The weight of it all crashes down on Zeon, and he can only choke out the word grandpa. Overwhelmed with guilt and relief, he throws himself at the swordsman, sobbing that he's sorry for ever doubting him. The old man just calls him a dumbass, but as Zeon cries, he realizes his hearing has been fully restored. He tries to push the boy off, muttering about a grown man crying like a baby, but Zeon refuses to let go. The swordsman looks to his blade, his true thoughts finally surfacing as he speaks to his old friend. He admits to himself that it was a close call. There was a very real chance the boy could have died. It was a gamble on a piece of trash, and Zeon only survived because of his own inherent strength. Back in the present, he hoists the boy over his shoulder, gruffly telling him they're ready to move and not to forgive him. Zeon is just confused by the old man's words, completely unaware of the cold calculation that almost cost him his life. With a wicked grin, the swordsman announces that they're short on time and need to leave immediately. A cold shiver runs down Zeon's spine. He has a very, very bad feeling about the old man's idea of hurrying. In an instant, the ground beneath them erupts, launching a massive pillar of sand into the sky. Zeon can only scream in terror as they rocket across the desert, the old swordsman cackling like a madman. He mockingly informs the boy that this is his punishment for sleeping for 4 days straight. But his taunting suddenly stops as his keen senses detect something enormous in the distance. Zeon, still reeling from the G-forces, feels the sudden change in atmosphere, wondering what fresh hell this is. His eyes drift towards the horizon, widening in absolute, paralyzing disbelief. There, blotting out the sky, is a living mountain, a creature of truly impossible scale. Even from 30 kilometers away, the sheer presence of the colossal magic beast defies all logic. The old swordsman calmly identifies the living mountain as the mobile fortress, Arshalan. It's a B-rank turtle beast, he explains, but its defensive power surpasses even A-rank monsters. Zeon is floored. People actually tame and ride that thing? The old man just scoffs at his ignorance. He tells the kid to open his eyes, because the world is a vast and terrifying place, and there are monsters out there capable of taming beasts of this impossible scale. He commands Zeon to burn the sight into his memory as they finally land back on the desert floor. But before they can even catch their breath, a figure leaps from the fortress's back. A powerful-looking old man crashes into the sand, the impact shaking the very ground. The swordsman holds Zeon back, his playful demeanor vanishing as he recognizes the newcomer. The man, with his long beard and glasses, looks up and greets him by name Deoden. Deoden greets the newcomer, Pavilsa, with a wide, mocking grin, joking that he's lost even more teeth. Pavilsa just sighs, retorting that Deoden is the real monster, for being over 100 and still full of energy. He asks what brings the old swordsman here, mentioning that the area is infested with scavengers. Deoden scoffs at the idea of running from such weaklings, calling it a waste of a long life. Zeon, meanwhile, is having a mental breakdown. Aren't old people supposed to be weak? How are these grandpas so powerful? Done with the conversation, Pavilsa lets out a sharp whistle, giving up on trying to talk sense into the brute. In response, the ground trembles as the colossal head of the Archelon rises from the sands. Xian can only stare up in utter disbelief. The sheer scale is just insane. As Dioden tells him it's time to go, they walk towards the waiting beast. Standing before its building-sized eye, Xian decides his best move is to just keep his mouth shut. Pavilsa's gaze finally lands on Xian, asking if this unfamiliar face is a new subordinate. But Dioden just laughs, lifting the boy by his cloak and calling him a piece of trash he picked up. The old mage seems genuinely shocked. For a man like Dioden to bring anyone along, he can only mutter that the world must be coming to an end. As they enter the beast's domain, Xian is the one whose world is ending, his jaw dropping in shock. Before him lies a massive city carved into a canyon, bustling with life. What is this place? Dioden explains that they've arrived at the home of the Mort clan. They're all direct descendants of Pavilsa, a bunch of fools who think they're chosen ones. Hearing the insult, Pavilsa turns back, demanding to know what gives him the right to judge their clan. Dioden just grins, calling them parasites who will be nothing once the Archelon's master is gone. Pavilsa adjusts his glasses, deciding they can save their little spat for another time. He firmly plants his foot, ready to get down to the real business at hand. Fine, he sighs, inviting Dioden to finally show him the goods he's brought to trade. With a confident smirk, Dioden opens a swirling vortex of personal subspace right in his palm. An absolute mountain of monster trophies and rare artifacts comes pouring out before them. Xian is completely stunned, wondering just how many powerful beasts the old man has slaughtered. He cautiously asks Dioden if he's a magic user, questioning where all this loot came from. The old swordsman looks at him in disgust, unable to believe he's traveling with an idiot who's never heard of subspace. Xian snaps back, demanding he just explain it, which only earns him a sharp rebuke for his insolence. But Pavilsa ignores their bickering, his professional gaze already fixed on a flawless monster fang, thoroughly impressed. Dioden cuts straight to the point, tired of the flattery and wanting to know the price. Pavilsa cheekily offers to pay in mana stones, but quickly retracts when Dioden grabs him, clearly not amused. The old merchant relents, admitting that a warrior like him has no use for mana stones anyway, and asks what he truly desires. While sipping his tea, Dioden lays out his first demand. A breastplate forged from the remains of a wolf ant queen. He pauses for a moment, letting the request sink in before continuing. And his second item is a subspace tool, much to Xian's quiet surprise. Pavilsa is utterly baffled, wondering why a swordsman who already has subspace would need either of those things. But Dioden simply states the gear isn't for him, grabbing the back of Xian's hood. He yanks the boy forward, declaring that all of it is for this idiot right here. And in that instant, Pavilsa's eyes widen with sudden understanding. The old merchant realizes the great Dioden must have found some use for this kid to be helping him. With a new sense of purpose, Pavilsa stands and bellows a name through the workshop. Kaylee. Dioden calmly grabs Xian, pulling the boy close as a heavy door creaks open somewhere behind them. Xian looks over his shoulder, completely caught off guard by the sudden summons. A woman enters the room, her utility belt packed with tools and vials, asking if she was called. As she steps into the light, Xian can only stare, thinking she's incredibly beautiful. Pavilsa immediately asks his granddaughter about a subspace bracelet she had crafted before. She corrects him it wasn't a bracelet but a gauntlet, one so perfectly enchanted Shed kept it for herself. The merchant doesn't hesitate, ordering her to give that precious gauntlet to the boy, much to her shock. Dioden just chuckles, recognizing the little girl from long ago, now all grown up into a master enchanter. Dioden praises her, noting how rare enchanters are, a truly useful skill for Pavilsa's granddaughter. Flustered, Kaylee can only stammer out an agreement as her grandfather gives her a little push forward. Pavilsa then quickly shoos them out, telling them to hurry, and also to get a new breastplate crafted. Clearly annoyed, Kaylee snaps at Xian to follow her, while he happily chirps his assent from behind. The two old men watch them go, Dioden barely containing a smirk at the entire situation. She leads him out into the sun-drenched, well-crafted streets of their hidden city. After a moment of silence, she stops and turns, demanding to know his relationship with that monster. Monster? Xian just thinks of him as some old man he met by chance, who's now dragging him around. His casual answer makes her absolutely snap, grabbing him in disbelief that he's still alive. But as she yells, a sudden realization dawns on Xian. He can see it now, she probably has the same thing. A horrifying memory flashes through her mind. Dioden, laughing like a demon while ripping a beast apart with his bare hands. She warns Xian to be careful, claiming that old man is a monster wearing human skin, and she would know. He follows her silently down the street until she stops before a large, ornate door. With a sudden, toothy grin, she proudly announces that this is her personal workshop. Kaylee swings the doors wide open, telling him to brace himself for a sight he's surely never seen. And as he steps inside, Xion's jaw simply drops in utter disbelief. The entire place is a treasure trove of master-crafted items, all of which she proudly claims as her own creations. She excitedly shoves a breastplate at him, gushing about its subspace storage and a rare restoration function. That one-word restoration immediately lights up Xion's eyes. He has to know if it can self-repair. She confirms it with a manic grin, adding that its fire attribute could turn him into an unimaginable monster. Xion can hardly believe it, asking if she's sure he can just take this. Kaylee replies that it was her grandfather's order. She adds a crucial detail: the subspace storage is a one-way trip. Xion doesn't care, grinning as he gratefully accepts. But as he takes it, her hand suddenly tightens, refusing to let go. A bizarre tug-of-war begins, with both of them locked in a struggle over the armor. He's literally dragged across the floor as she puts all her strength into pulling it back. She screams that she can't do it. She won't give her precious child to a nobody. But he rips it from her grasp, cackling that this masterpiece is all his now. In that exact moment, a colossal roar shakes the very foundations of the workshop. Dazed, Xion wonders if he should give it back, but Kaylee's eyes are wide with a terror that has nothing to do with him. She recognizes that sound with chilling certainty. It's the cry of the Arshalon. They've found them. Xion screams out, demanding to know who they are. But Kaylee is paralyzed by fear, her body trembling against the door. In another room, her grandfather and Devours seem to have been expecting trouble. With a grimace, the old swordsman mutters about the persistent bastards who have arrived. A storm of dust and riders appears on the horizon, the dreaded scavengers. Xion is still processing the name when Kaylee grabs him, confirming his fears and yelling at him to run. He scrambles after her, asking what these people do that has her so shaken. She explains they're a notorious gang of Awakened, led by a D-rank lunatic known as Black Shark. But they're more than just looters. They're psychos who don't care who they kill. As they race towards a sealed gate, Xion can't understand if their leader is only D-rank. Why is she this terrified? She bursts into the room, screaming for her grandfather. But the two old men are completely unfazed, Devours simply stating he already saw the rascals coming. Kaylee frantically asks if she should bring their giant turtle beast, Arshalon, to fight. But Pavilsa just clenches his fists, grimly stating that running is pointless. They have to fight them head-on. She immediately offers to gather all their fighters, but is cut short by a sharp, commanding no. Devours kicks his feet up, casually declaring that the two of them will handle it. He takes a swig from his flask, leaving Kaylee completely stunned by his confidence. Then, he suddenly turns on Xion, barking at the dumbass to report for duty. The old swordsman points a finger right in his face, telling him that he will be the one to take care of this. Devours grabs him, yelling that he has to repay his debt by fighting, leaving Xion to scream back, how can he possibly defeat a D-ranker? Devours just stares him down, asking him a simple question. So what? Is he scared? The old swordsman's words are a direct challenge. Xion is left absolutely speechless, caught completely off guard. Out in the desert, he curses himself, realizing he's been goaded into this fight. He remembers Devours' taunt to go cry in a corner, angry that he fell for such a cheap trick. Taking a deep breath, he tries to calm his racing heart, knowing he has no time to waste on anger. He closes his eyes, focusing his senses and drawing upon the endless sand around him. He can feel it, a massive presence thundering towards him, arriving in just 5 minutes. He clenches his gloved hand, the sand swirling with his rising anxiety. The same hopeless question echoes in his mind. How can he possibly defeat a real awakener? And he wonders, how can he beat someone whose rank is so much higher than his own? Far above, atop the colossal turtle, Pavilsa turns to Devours, questioning if this is really the right call. He points out that Xion is all alone, just a puny E-ranker, facing a true awakener. But Devours is unmoved. His philosophy is harsh as the desert itself. In this world, defeat is death. Pavilsa sighs, admitting his old friend is as extreme as ever, musing that a tiger cub can easily be killed by a dog. But, he thinks, that's only if the cub doesn't know how to bear its fangs. Suddenly, he shouts down from the beast's back, his voice booming across the sands, calling out to the kid below. He tells Xion to keep one crucial thing in mind as this battle begins. Xion looks up, clenching his fist, taking in the old man's words. Just then, a new group emerges from the swirling sand, having finally caught up, their leader already asking which survivors will be useful enough to sell. The leader, Gawain, gives a chilling command, no mercy. He orders his raiders to cut off their limbs and feed them to the turtles. With a cry, his warriors charge forward, ready to show everyone the terror of the black shark. They gallop across the sand, eager to have a little fun with their cornered prey. But just as they close in, Xion stomps his foot hard into the desert floor. The ground beneath the raiders lurches violently, throwing them from their mounts. Gawain can only stare in disbelief, a scream caught in his throat. What is that? The entire landscape begins to split apart, the sand itself opening up like a chasm. His men are thrown into chaos, screaming for a retreat as the dunes swallow them whole. One of the raiders looks back in terror, asking her leader if he's okay as the ground continues to move. Gawain denies it was a trap, realizing one of their targets must be a powerful earth mage. But before anyone can react, a shadowy figure is suddenly behind his subordinate, her eyes widening in pure shock. The bandaged leader roars for the attacker to let her go, but the mysterious man holds her firm amidst a storm of sand. With cold, merciless eyes, the bandaged swordsman clenches his fist tightly. A crimson spray marks the end of her life, and he turns his gaze to his next victim. He looks straight at Xion, raising a sword that burns with a sinister red energy. The swordsman unleashes a devastating slash, a blur of motion meant to cleave Xion in two. His attack carves a brutal scar across the desert landscape, but as the dust begins to clear, his eyes widen in disbelief. Who in the world is this brat? He didn't dodge, he didn't even flinch. The swordsman realizes with a jolt his attack was blocked. As Gawain stands frozen, another of his raiders, a swordsman named Mashimoto, rushes in to flank Xion. A warning cry rings out as Mashimoto leaps high into the air, preparing a deadly strike from above. He brings his crimson blade down with overwhelming force, aiming to split Xion right in half. But it's Gawain who loses his patience, roaring at the kid to stop his damn tricks as he throws a punch of his own. His fist connects not with flesh, but with a sudden, unyielding wall of golden light. The bandaged leader stares at his hand in pure disbelief. He didn't hit a person, he hit solid sand. Now his entire arm is trapped, encased in a grip of hardened earth that he can't seem to break. With a furious scream, he pours his energy into his fist, determined to shatter this humiliating prison. Seeing their captain caught, the other raiders realize this kid is controlling something, and they need to attack together. But while they were busy planning, Xion was already moving, landing a brutal counter on Mashimoto and revealing his cold, glowing eyes. But as Xion stands over his foe, a familiar voice echoes in his mind, telling him to remember one thing. It warns him that killing another human will bring far more trouble than any D-rank monster ever could. A vision of his mentors appears, and the voice clarifies the most important detail. These raiders are not human. Not human? The concept hangs in the air as Xion stares at the ghostly figures of Deoden and Pavilsa. They are monsters, the voice explains. Creatures who torture and slaughter others for pure enjoyment. Their sins are listed over 200 victims, women and children defiled without a second thought. The blood from his last strike pools at his feet, a grim testament to the path he's now on. With their humanity stripped away by their own actions, Xion's power answers the call, his cloak dissolving into sand. Gawain can only watch, screaming in pure fury as the boy he underestimated begins to transform. Then, with a silent command, Xion unleashes a storm of sand projectiles, a deadly barrage aimed to end this fight. But the raider leader simply scoffs, dismissing the attack as nothing more than cheap tricks. He seethes from within the sandstorm, calling Xion trash and questioning how he could ever hope to win. The threats escalate, promising a slow, torturous end, feeding Xion to monsters piece by piece. Xion just listens, unimpressed, before calmly asking if that's all he has for his last words. A sudden, sharp realization hits Gawain, his bloodshot eye widening in dawning horror. Because behind Xion, the spectral image of his master, Deoden, grins with absolute confidence. And with that same chilling confidence, Xion throws the insult right back, calling the raider a piece of trash. Gawain can only stare in disbelief, the weight of the situation finally crashing down on him. Xion clarifies what he means by trash, pointing to the body of the raider named Klang, and then to another fallen comrade, Mashimoto, both already dead before Gawain even noticed. Gawain's mind races, refusing to accept it. His elites would never fall to some amateur. He stares into the swirling sand, wondering just what kind of monstrous power this kid is hiding. Suddenly, a dragon made of sand erupts from the storm, forcing the raider on the defensive. His patience snaps, his own crimson aura flaring violently to life. Hez done playing games, roaring for Xion to show the true power Hez concealing in the sandstorm. He taunts him, demanding he prove he's a real awakener, and to stop hiding like a coward, and finally face him. Fueled by rage, he unleashes a swirling vortex of energy to blow away the sand. He braces himself, fists clenched, demanding to know what's next. But there's only silence, and a horrifying realization dawns in his glowing red eyes. The sand clears, and his opponent is simply gone, vanished. Gawain frantically searches, but he's already been outmaneuvered. Zeon is right behind him. A flicker of disbelief crosses his mind. Did he predict the attack? No. This is something else entirely. Zeon had finally lured him in, bringing the raider right into his attack range. The realization hits Gawain like a brick. The entire sandstorm was a bait. For a non-combat type, Zeon closes the distance with shocking speed, grabbing him by the throat. Gawain can only grit his teeth in frustration as Zeon reminds him of a simple truth, that a single mistake in battle is all it takes to lose your life. It was all a trick. But Gawain isn't finished, vowing to make him feel every blow this one is for Mashimoto. A massive shockwave of crimson energy erupts, engulfing everything in its devastating blast. He screams the names of his fallen, dedicating every ounce of this attack to their memory. Zeon grits his teeth, taking the full force of the raider's vengeful energy. Gawain's eyes blaze with confidence. He doesn't care what tricks Zeon has. They're useless once he's caught. With a final, crushing grip, he tells him to blame his own weakness and prepare to die. But the body in his hands suddenly feels wrong, like it's losing its form. He looks down in utter disbelief. He was just holding him. Where did he go? The answer lies at his feet, as Zeon sinks into the ground, becoming a vortex of sand. The raider's eyes widen in horrified realization. He slipped out of his gauntlets to escape. That damn rat. He left his gear behind just to get away. And in a flash of sand, Zeon is gone, leaving his enemy fuming in the middle of the desert. Gawain curses himself for his critical mistake. He panicked and let the boy escape. But as he examines his wound, he notices something. The power behind it has dropped significantly. It all clicks into place. The gauntlets must have been amplifying his attacks. He wrongly assumes Zeon is a rare wind type, using sand to add physical force. Blocking a punch, he feels the pathetic lack of power behind it. With a surge of confidence, Gawain declares Hez figured out all of Zeon's tricks. His own fist begins to glow with a menacing red aura, his confidence fully restored. He mocks him, a magic type without an amplifier, thinks he can beat a combat type in close quarters. But Zeon's eyes don't show a hint of fear, only a cold, chilling smirk. In a flash, he unleashes a storm of sand, proving he's far from finished. Gawain's blood runs cold. That sandstorm wasn't a diversion. It was a direct attack on his blind spot. And Zeon just smirks, finally seeing the old man's guard drop for the first time. Furious at being played, Gawain draws a blade, enraged that this kid would use the same trick back at him. But then, a horrifying detail clicks into place. Wait, where are the gauntlets? The sand surges with an impossible amount of energy. A magic type could never channel this kind of raw power without an amplifying item. It's just not possible. As Zeon rushes in, a terrifying thought begins to form in Gawain's mind. He takes a direct hit, his brain scrambling to deny what he's witnessing. Spikes of earth erupt around him. This isn't just sand magic. It's an ability that manipulates the very world itself. He's dragged down by grasping hands of sand, screaming internally that a power like this should never exist. And as the old masters watch from afar, the sheer scale of his power is undeniable. Klexi can barely process what he's seeing. The boy can control sand itself. The entire desert has become his personal weapon, his shield, his domain. And it wasn't a contest of pure strength. They knew if it was a straight fight, Gawain's experience might have won. But the kid was smarter. He used his status as an irregular to lure the raider into a false sense of security. He waited for the perfect moment, a tactical decision born not from training but from pure instinct. Absurdly, impossibly, he learned how to be a hunter in the middle of a life-or-death battle. Pavilsa's eyes widen with a chilling realization this is no mere tiger cub. He turns to the swordsman beside him and asks, "Deoden, where in the world did you find a monster like that?"